Left is sponsored by To the Left Media, LLC, and to the extent applicable, their guests. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of NewsWeb Radio Company or its management.
You're listening to WCPT's To the Left with Samina and Shauna. Here are our hosts, Samina Mustafa and Shauna East.
Hi, Lady B. How are you?
I'm doing great.
It's so nice to see you.
I know.
She's like, I know. It is always nice to see
I'm happy to be here. You just don't know I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be alive.
You know what? We should all be happy to be alive.
Yes.
Welcome, everyone. You are listening to the Left. My name is Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
And it's been another super quiet week in Chicago and the world.
Very chill.
We are going to try to fill these first few minutes, but we have a super exciting show this week, today, with two candidates for trustee in Oak Park and River Forest, which are two suburbs immediately to the west of Chicago. Arthi Walker-Pettikotla and Erica Bachner, who are running on the OPRF for Racial Equity platform. And so that's really exciting. But before we get to that, I just want to remind folks that if you are hearing this on a radio, you can also see us, I hope, on a device called...
Brace yourself.
On an internet-enabled device on a platform called Facebook. You can see us on Facebook Live. We have a Facebook page at To The Left Radio. All of our handles are at To The Left Radio. But with that, let's get started. Shauna, what's on your mind?
Well, we had an election.
Did we?
Yeah.
I had no idea. That was Tuesday. It was Tuesday, February 26th in the city of Chicago.
Yeah. So what's on my mind is obviously the mayor's race was... It could have been worse. Let me put it that way.
So
right?
So positive.
It could have been worse.
Yes. You know why? But let's explain to people how it could have been worse.
We could have had like some serious white supremacists going into the runoff.
Yeah, at the mayor's level.
At the mayor's level.
Mm-hmm.
We could have had another Daley. We could have had Mendoza. You know, it could have been worse. It could have been worse.
Right.
I'm trying to be optimistic here.
I appreciate that.
But, you know, the problem is that Preckwinkle and Lightfoot are, you know, branding themselves as progressives. And I think this is problematic because it's like the word is losing its meaning. And I just want everyone to take a look at their records and really think about it. There really is no clear progressive. And we're going to talk more about this, I think, in the next few weeks. But,
yes. Yeah, my assessment of it is who do you think you can reason with and negotiate with, and who will respond to for some folks, who will respond to your protests.
And who can you even hold accountable?
Right.
Is the biggest problem.
Right. And I think that is going to be something that hopefully more folks are tuning into. We had, unfortunately, record low turnout. It wasn't the lowest turnout, but it was pretty low.
Yeah, 35.22%, and that percent is just of registered voters. So there's 1.5 million registered voters, and that percentage is of just the people who were registered, I found out.
Right. And if someone shared the numbers, I want to say it might have been Natalie Moore or someone of that caliber shared the percentage of voters that voted in 1983 when Harold Washington was elected, and I want to say it was something like, anyway, I think it might have just been black voters. It was like 80%. It was significant,
Mm-hmm.
but there were also at that time there was a massive drive to register new voters and engage them. So that's where that's a whole separate conversation. But we have folks who are always like, oh, let's register voters, let's register young voters. But they're not doing the next step, which is
getting them to the polls,
helping them make a plan to vote.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, okay, the election's on the 26th, but early voting starts this day. Do you need to know where you vote?
Mm-hmm.
All those things, which I think if you're new to voting or you don't do it often enough, it's not something you remember. I happen to know where my polling place is because it's across the street from where I live. And it's also where there's a gym. It's a park district. So there's a gym in there. That's where I work out. So I go there all the time. But chances are not everybody's going to their polling place just coincidentally all the time.
The rule of thumb is that you're supposed to reach out to a potential voter 6 times in order to actually move them from support, from just learning about you to support to voter.
Okay. So that's clearly that didn't happen.
A lot of people power required.
Right. I also think there were a couple of non-specific candidate initiatives that didn't happen, that happened for the midterms. For example, partly because of the weather and partly because of some decisions made by some of the organizers, there wasn't a march to the polls that happened for the municipal cycle like there did for the midterms.
You mean the Women's March?
Yeah, that was one example. Well, that's an example that wasn't specific to a candidate, but it could have turned out folks, right? It could have gotten folks excited because they would all voted together.
Amara Enya did buses to the she had a party bus where they were going around to colleges picking people up. There were attempts to do that, but not in a independent way that brought in all voters. It was just specific to her campaign that I saw. But
yeah, and I think sometimes having those big initiatives, I know there's a whole bunch of groups that have done forums, and I myself was working on aldermanic forums with the League of Women Voters. And those actually, we had, I think at last count, we had over 2,500 folks attend our forums, and we only covered 10 wards. So that's pretty significant.
That's awesome.
But the long and short of it is, where there were a lot of candidates, it'd be interesting to see. I'm sure somebody's done this analysis to look at, if there were a lot of candidates, how did the turnout rank versus the last cycle, and where maybe there wasn't a challenge at all, and how did it compare with the midterms? I looked at my own ward, the 47th ward. On November 6th, over 30,000 voters, which is, I think, roughly 80% of registered voters turned out. On February 26th or through February 26th, only 18,000 showed up. So that's a pretty significant drop-off.
One thing I'm also concerned about is with a Preckwinkle and Lightfoot in the runoff, that's not going to bring a lot of voters. Like if it was Daley versus Preckwinkle, you would maybe see that rush of people trying to make history by having the first black woman mayor. But with two sort of indistinguishable folks that are branded progressives but tied to the establishment, I just don't know if that's going to result in a big wave of voters. So that's why we should look at the progressive candidates who either won or went to the runoff. I think... Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I do.
Sure. Go for it.
I mean, so on the other hand, while that, while the mayoral left something to be desired, I do think there is a bit of a political revolution happening here.
Yeah, we had some major wins, outright wins, not even runoffs.
Right. Maria Hadden, who got her start on our show. No one had ever heard of her until she was on our very first episode of To the Left, and then we catapulted her into superstardom.
Maria, are you hearing that?
And now she won in the 49th ward.
Yeah, very excited about her win. Very excited. And she worked incredibly hard, as we all know. And she was one of our first guests. She was our first guest with Eric and Anton. So that's a huge win. There were a couple of folks who were surprised that they went to a runoff, like Pat O'Connor, I think, who is in the 40th ward, has been in office since, I want to say, was it 1983 when he was first elected?
I believe it's over 30 years.
Yeah, so it's been a long time. Yeah. And he has been challenged before, and this time he had 4 challengers and only got about 33% of the vote. So he's in a runoff with
Andre Vasquez,
who we also had on the show. Just saying.
He won because of us.
Just saying. Who else? And then we had Jeanette Taylor on the show, and she's in the 20th ward, and that was actually an open seat that was vacated by Willie Cochran. So that one's going to be going to a runoff against, she's in a runoff against Nicole Johnson. So that's,
another person who got their start on our show was Byron Sikcho Lopez is now going to the runoff with Alexander Acevedo.
Right.
So that's a really interesting one there because that was Solis's former seat.
Right.
Rosanna Rodriguez in the 33rd Ward is going to go toe-to-toe with Deb Mell. She actually beat Deb Mell.
That was really remarkable. I don't think people understand how meaningful that is, that she actually got more votes. And the history of that ward is pretty amazing. I'm reading a book about Harold Washington and just the stuff that Dick Mell pulled. If people knew the history of the Mell machine, I think they'd be a little bit more animated and will come out on April 2nd or before then.
Another noteworthy race is Proco Joe versus our nerdy new alderman, Daniel Espada.
There you go. So what
They
do you
said
want?
the hipster alderman's out and the nerd is in. That's what the headlines are saying.
I'm sorry. Maybe I don't know. Is Proco Joe a hipster?
I never thought of him as a hipster, but Block Club Chicago apparently does.
I don't know who writes their headlines. Block Club, call us.
I think it was Block Club.
Okay.
Sorry if that's a misquote, but I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm like, that's an interesting one. But, that was an interesting one for a lot of reasons because someone was clearly, I think somebody in our sort of network of political nerds said something to the effect of there was a coordinated campaign of opposition research that was kind of dumped on the news waves just a few weeks before the election, and it clearly wasn't. And it's not like Moreno has not had sort of bad press before, but again, it's amazing how someone like Burke, with really a torrent, an avalanche of bad press, retained his seat.
It just shows you the remnants of the patronage and all these things.
But let's think about that. Burke had two challengers. He had three challengers at one point. Jose Torres, who then dropped out and endorsed Tanya Patino, who was supported by Chuy Garcia and Clem Balanoff and sort of that Our Revolution Illinois crew.
And David Orr.
And he endorsed David Orr.
Yeah.
Endorsed by David Orr. So she had sort of the progressive stamp of approval, right?
I mean, the stamp of approval for me was for Jaime Guzman.
Right.
Because he seemed more of an independent candidate.
Also had someone who had history working for Chuy. So
Right.
It wasn't like he didn't have a progressive reputation. But as far as, kind of pulling together an effort when kind of this seemed like the most opportune time to take out Burke. I mean, he's literally under federal corruption charges.
He looks like a cartoon villain. He looks like he's from a painting of Al Capone and his gang. What are we doing, Chicago?
Allegedly. But I know.
He is that old though. He could have been.
But here's the thing. If you were gonna I think people literally were shocked, just shocked. And there's my Chicago accent coming out, that he did not get taken out when someone like O'Connor's in a runoff. Kappelman up in the 46th Ward is in a runoff. Joe Moore got taken out wholesale. Moreno taken out.
Which, if you look at the trend with people being on our show and then winning their race or going to a runoff, next week we have Marianne Lalonde.
There you go. Good shameless plug and topical transition. Very well done.
Marianne Lalonde is in the runoff with Kappelman, and she will also be a guest on next week's post-election episode.
Yes.
Of To the Left.
Yes, and that was another one. Again, a pretty crowded field, which I think sometimes people look in and say, oh, there's several challengers. That just makes it almost easier for the incumbent to stay in. But in this case, enough folks said not Kappelman. And actually, there were several progressive groups that literally had as their endorsement for that race. They hadn't come. They knew there were several good folks running, and they said, you know what? Vote for who aligns with you, but let's get Kappelman out.
I believe it was also Lift the Ban organizers and others that have been calling out
One People's
Kappelman.
Campaign had specifically a not Kappelman endorsement, which is the C4 arm of One Northside. There were a couple of folks who came out pretty specifically and hadn't endorsed someone. But a lot of folks that endorsed Erica Wozniak. in that race.
So we only have a couple minutes. Did we want to cover any other national stuff before we blow our wad on the elections and don't have anything to talk about next week?
So I'm just gonna pull this out. It's still in the studio.
They haven't burned it yet.
Yeah, this week is a big week for Medicare for All. Pramila Jayapal and 106 co-sponsors of the Medicare All Act of 2019. The bill number is 1384. We lost 676, sadly. It's some bill for NATO. Very unfortunate. But the bill has been reintroduced, so groups like National Nurses United, PNHP, People's Action, all of these groups are now coming together to say, let's get the word out. 106 sponsors, actually less than the number of sponsors that we had on 676, the previous version of the bill. But this one is an improved version and was co-authored by groups like NNU. So a lot of folks are really excited about it. So that was a big deal this week.
So make sure your representative is supporting it.
And there's we'll share a graphic that shows the Democrats that have co-sponsored it and ones that haven't.
There's a beautiful meme.
Yeah, it's the usual suspects. It's the usual suspects: Lipinski, Quigley, Underwood, Kasten, all the Republicans. That's and Schneider. And Krishnamurthy, those are kind of the folks who didn't support in the last round, and the new freshmen, Kasten and Underwood, are not co-sponsors either. So you know who to call, folks. And then there were we have like a minute left. The Cohen hearings, Michael Cohen, who was Donald Trump's personal attorney. I just want to give a shout out to our girls, AOC, Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley, our women, who just did an amazing job. I just want to give them a shout out. That's all.
And I just want to point out how tragic and heartbreaking it was to see Cummings and them, push Tlaib to apologize for that. That was really gut-wrenching.
No, once again, women of color and marginalized women are always being asked to walk back and protect the fragility of white men.
Yeah, Cummings seemed more interested in helping his BFF out than Rashida.
Okay, you know what? We're going to talk about racial equity and white supremacy in the next segment, because we're going to be talking to Arthi Walker-Pethakottla and Erica Bachner, who are running in OPRF for racial equity. But we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. We're producing a show on WCPT Sundays at 1 o'clock.
What should we call it?
How about Smash the Patriarchy?
I like it, but that's a lot of pressure. What about left-leaning ladies?
What about woman-splaining?
Yeah, but what about when we have guys on? What about Madigan's worst nightmare?
I think it's enough attention.
I got it. To the left.
I like that. That could work.
Tune in to the left with Samina and Shauna on WCPT 820, Sundays at 1.
Welcome back.
And we are back to the Left. I'm Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
And we are talking to two amazing women running for village trustee.
Woohoo!
In the villages of Oak Park and River Forest.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Directly across from me is Arthi Walker-Pethakottla. Wave, Arthi.
Hi.
We have Facebook Live.
People don't know who's across from you, though.
But that's why I told her to wave.
Okay, good.
Hello.
And Erica Bachner, who is to my right. And we are talking about their races. Yeah, do the Miss America wave.
I was at a march yesterday for St. Patrick's Day.
Very well done.
So you
That's
got
impressive.
You got it down.
I know. It's an important part of running for office, you guys. We are talking about running for office for local offices. We just had the elections in Chicago on February 26th. For those who don't know, Chicago does a primary and then a runoff on April 2nd. But in the rest of the state of Illinois, for most municipalities, the consolidated municipal election date is April 2nd, and that is the same in Oak Park. So Arthi and I, just a little background, Arthi and I actually met through an incubator for women running for office, and then we were featured in the same Chicago Tribune story about women running for office. And then we said, hey, we were just in the same story. We should meet for coffee. And then here we are. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Samina.
So Arthi, tell us about yourself.
So I am a 10-year Oak Park resident, and I've been involved in politics for a long time. I have a pretty wide-ranging background. I'm an Army vet. I served in the military for 6 years. I've been a progressive my whole life. I was a former single mother. So, I've just kind of lived a life as many, many, many working class women of color have done. And so, I really believe that we need more representation, more, actual unique representation in office. And I firmly believe in electing women of color, which is why I worked on Samina's campaign, which has just been like this, honestly, this incubator for progressive women of color to just go out and change the world. And so, yeah, I'm so fortunate to have her in my life for that reason. Yeah.
Aw. Well, I have to say, Arthi is one of those women who is a powerhouse. And she is very clear on what her values are. And so when she started to think about OPRF or racial equity, I thought, you're on the right track. Go for it. So why don't you tell us about that and how that came about?
Yeah, that came about because I had a friend that knows the current village president. So Oak Park has a village form of government where we have a village president, 6 village trustees, and the village manager and the village hall that actually do the day-to-day operations. The village president, my friend said, the village president is looking to put a slate of candidates together for the upcoming elections in April. You should talk to him. And I was like, well, I don't really like him, but I'll talk to him. And I talked to him, and it was not that great of a conversation because, he said, I asked him who he was looking for, and he said, I'm looking for centrist people that are not too far to the left, not too far to the right, that are aware of social justice issues. But, we have a levy, so we need to be able to navigate around things. And, and I listened to him, and I said, well, I am not who you're looking for because I'm very much on the left. And, the conversation ended with, thanks. And if I hear anything or need your, support, I'll call you back. And he never called me back. But then I got really angry. Like I had this internal feeling that why the heck is this guy, why is he representing me? And why are centrist people on the board representing what is supposed to be a progressive community? Everybody thinks of Oak Park and, everybody thinks of Oak Park as this progressive community, but it really isn't. It's super fake progressive. And so I didn't get angry enough to run because, as Samina knows very well, I am a massive introvert and I like staying in the background and writing policy and doing those things. So I didn't get angry enough to run, but I got angry enough to write a very long Facebook post to a group called Oak Park Progressive Women of Color, where I said, we need women of color running for local office. And the problem is women of color are asked to save the world time and time again. And what this group, I want to create a group, and it's literally just a community group. It's not a slate of candidates. We're not going to be running together, but we are going to be supporting each other. So let's host events where we just put all our petitions down on a table and invite the community to those events. And the response to that post was enormous. It was so enormous that I ended up crying in the car on the way to pick one of my kids up because women were just like, yes, this is what we have needed. We have been looking for something like this. There are 37 existing equity organizations in Oak Park. That tells you how important equity is. The conversation is to Oak Park, but not one of them focuses on equity in representation on elected boards, right? So I tell people it's not enough to have a racial equity policy or a gender equity policy. You need people that are in office that are actively going to implement those policies, because otherwise those policies are just mere words on paper. Right. And so the group had their first, we had a petition signing event. Erica came out from River Forest, and we had, in some cases, 50 petition signatures per petition, which for some of these women was enough. That's all they needed. Mm-hmm. And we have 7 women of color running across Oak Park and River Forest for school board, library board, trustee for Oak Park and River Forest, and I think it's awesome. And I can't wait until 2021 where we get even more. I think this is honestly what our village, what Illinois needs.
Yeah,
That's
no,
amazing.
And so you're listening to Arthi Walker Pethicola of OPRF for racial equity. She's running for village trustee in Oak Park. You're listening to the left. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about how the response has been. You are part of this Oak Park Progressive Women of Color group. Yeah. Now, outside of that, what have you heard and dealt with?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think Erica can talk about what the response in River Forest is. And Oak Park, it's mixed, right? Oak Park is kind of, I say it's a fake woke, fake progressive community. We had the America to Me stuff, which was this big documentary about, the lack of racial equity in our schools. And some of the response from internally in the community is, yes, great. Other bits of the response is, wait, so we're just supposed to vote for these women because they're women of color? Why? No, I'm not doing that. Mm-hmm. And then some of the response is, well, why can't white women be a part of this? Why can't men of color be a part of this? And it's like, if you don't understand why women of color need their own affinity space and need that support, then you're part of the problem. You're really part of the problem. But that's been some of the feedback that we've gotten is, why can't white women be a part of this? Why can't men of color be a part of this? And, I'm not, it is what it is at this point, really. I'm just focused on getting these women elected, and we've got great community support for this, so we're just gonna focus and get to April 2nd.
Yeah, and you're the only woman of color running for village trustee in this cycle.
Yes, in this cycle, which is why I decided to run. So when I started putting the group together and everybody was like, yes, this is amazing, that's when people really started asking me to run, and I was like, no, you don't want me running. I swear I am a very honest person. I cannot hold back.
Folks, we're talking to the Rashida Tlaib of Oak Park.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, you're on trend right now. I mean, this is great.
AOC / Rashida Tlaib.
I love it.
You're right. You're right at home.
I will take it.
Can I ask a little bit of a boring question?
Yeah.
I live in Chicago, so I'm not familiar. If you can just explain, what is a trustee for those of us who don't have that?
So it's pretty much like city council for Chicago. That's what I equate it to,
okay.
Right? These are the people that make the decisions about where your levy money is spent, where your property taxes are spent at the village level. So what infrastructure are we going to fix? What buildings are we going to help resurrect? How much of the pensions, fire and police pensions, are we going to pay? And, what are the ordinances, the zoning ordinances that we're going to pass or, strip away or things like that? How much affordable housing are we going to have in the village? These are very much like core city issues. And because I think it's a village form of government, people tend to lose well, what does that even mean? But yeah, at the Oak Park Village level, and we verified, this has been fact-checked by the village clerk, there's only ever been 2 women of color ever elected to Oak Park's village board since it was created in 1952. So for a village that says we care about diversity, that is some shit statistic right there.
Ooh.
Right?
Boo.
Sorry.
It's a good thing. Lady B, I don't know if we're going to get fined for that.
Oh, we got a thumbs up.
Okay, we're good.
Sorry.
Okay.
But I'll watch my
Hopefully we'll be on next week, everyone.
Sorry, sorry, y'all.
FCC, that was a Hindi term.
Yeah.
it's very
Can I
arcane.
swear in Hindi? I'm going to swear in
very
Hindi now.
arcane. It's very arcane.
I'm just going to swear in
Just
Hindi.
like Rashida.
Yeah, I would do
That
that. Well, she doesn't speak Hindi. She speaks Arabic.
Right.
But yeah.
That's a really awful statistic. How can we say we're for equity and we're for diversity? And I've had a lot of white women come up to me and say, I've moved here for the diversity. Well, then elect women of color.
Yeah.
Stop having a problem with women of color stepping up and speaking their truth. And, you know, it's been really interesting. I had one PTO mom that said, well, I never see you at the PTO meeting, so I can't vote for you because I don't see you at these PTO meetings. Do you know the advocacy that I do outside of like your space? And because I'm not showing up in the way you want me to show up, you can't vote for me. Like, that's a problem.
And before we pivot over to Erica, I do want to just remind folks who heard our show back in January when we talked about white supremacy on the left, Bryn Hovde, who came on, who lives in Oak Park.
Who is my campaign manager.
Exactly. Who started race-conscious dialogues.
Yes.
Actually, so who, just for the folks who don't remember, Bryn is white. And actually, because of the race-conscious dialogues, a lot of the women who've gone through that have then decided to support.
That is my core base of supporters.
Right.
The people that came out to help us get petition signatures, because I decided at the very last minute. I had like a week and a half or 2 weeks to get all the petition signatures. And my core base of support were the women that had gone through that program, the white women that had gone through that program. And so Dot Lamshade-Reed and Bryn Hovde have just been doing amazing work. I think it's necessary work. But yeah, she's an amazing campaign manager. I mean, and she worked on your campaign too.
Yeah, no. So. But that's when people say, what can I do? How can I be an ally?
Yeah.
That's it. So we're going to pivot to Erica. We're going to bring Erica Bachner into this conversation. And Erica and I think we met, did we meet through?
Probably through Bryn.
Was it through Bryn?
Bryn is the connector.
I think it might have been. Well, I think someone in Indivisible Oak Park, which you run, reached out and said we want to feature Samina, and so Bryn ended up.
Right,
Bryn ended up speaking. Bryn, I think Dwayne on my team also ended up speaking, and then you and I subsequently met, and the rest is history. Yeah. And so I was super excited to hear that you were part of this initiative and that you decided to run as well. So why don't you tell folks a little bit about the work you do and what made you decide to run?
Yeah, so I co-lead a Indivisible group in the Oak Park area, and that is across Oak Park, River Forest, Forest Park, Berwyn, parts of Galewood, Elmwood Park. I think I could go on. There are probably people who are shouting their town name too, and have been doing that for a few years now. And through the course of that work, advocating locally, statewide, and national level on so many different issues that cross, intersectionally. So women's rights, disability rights, the rights for those who need affordable health care. And in that work, immigrant rights in particular, River Forest had a opportunity, the community asked for it, to have a welcoming village resolution. And this was during the time of the bans on Muslim people. And we understood as residents how important it was for us to say we are welcoming to everyone. We've got Dominican University amongst other universities as well, but in particular Dominican, they estimate that their students is probably about 10% of undocumented students, which would be the highest in the nation. And that's only an estimate. They think they're underestimating that. So as a community, we got together, and I was really one of the leaders who helped in that, in educating other residents, but also educating trustees and getting them involved so that they could write a strong enough resolution to create policy for our law enforcement, because when you do that, everyone is safe then, right? In the course of that work, I saw the need for representation of voices like my own, somebody who is a woman of color, somebody with a moderate income, somebody who has seen a little bit more than a suburban life, who has been on the edges of poverty with my family. And I thought a couple of years ago that I was going to back somebody 100% to be the trustee and do all the work. And as I was saying that and still doing all the work that I've been doing, people were saying, Erica, we don't think you understand. We're backing you. And I was like, oh. So knowing that there is a strong contingency in River Forest, to have that, to have someone like me represent on the board really helped me make my decision to run. And it's been overwhelming, right? So, it's really all about just people knowing my name. And once somebody knows my name and knows my story and understands that I've got this record of leadership on issues and collaboration and working with so many dozens of organizations, as part of the Families Belong Together coalition, we came up with 70 different organizations at least last year to put together the rally and march in Chicago. I was one of the fortunate people to speak at that, speaking to 60,000 people.
Wow.
And it was, to be able to do that in almost, in just a few weeks shows the dedication that I will bring to something like a village board role. So between that and then I've got 13 years of investment banking experience in finance, I have several years of corporate real estate and interior architecture experience. And so when you think about the ways that Artie was talking about the village trustee and what they do, we're looking at the economic development, who's going to come into our space, who's got the, finances and coming up with budgets to show the value of your village. These are all things that I can be really great at if I don't, toot my own horn.
Yeah, no, but that always seems to be the challenge, especially for women of color running. It's like you're always sort of having to demonstrate, like, I have this much experience. Yeah. I have so much experience to bring, when a lot of people who don't look like us are not sort of pushed that way.
Yeah.
And so I think I remember you telling me one of your first meetings to talk to someone about running for office. You were sort of getting that pushback, like, why would you start for something like this? It's sort of like start smaller or start somewhere else.
Without a doubt, yeah. People have asked, well, why don't you join a commission and then wait a couple of years and have your base of supporters? And like, well, I already have my base of supporters in River Forest. And so I think it is one of those things where people don't understand the network, that I provide. And because they see their networks are different than my networks, right? So, and part of my tagline is a voice for all in River Forest. It's because people don't understand that there are other networks and other people that it's important to talk to with issues that are going to come up, really big issues that need somebody who understands the intersectionality of affordable housing and disability rates, right? And disabled, who understands that people who live in moderate income need different things than those who are affluent.
Right. Great. That you've just been listening to Erica Bachner. She is a candidate for village trustee in River Forest. She and Artie Walker-Petticoat are in the studio. They're both talking about their runs for office and as part of the OPRF Racial Equity Platform. You're listening to the Left. We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. I'm Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
We're producing a show on WCPT Sundays at 1 o'clock.
What should we call it?
How about Smash the Patriarchy?
I like it, but that's a lot of pressure. What about left-leaning ladies?
What about woman-splaining?
Yeah, but what about when we have guys on? What about Madigan's worst nightmare?
He gets enough attention.
I got it. To the left.
I like that. That could work.
Tune in to the Left with Samina and Shauna on WCPT 820, Sundays at 1.
And we are back. You're listening to the Left. I'm Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
And we are on WCPT 820. If you're listening on the radio, that's where we are. If you are near an internet-enabled device, you can watch us on Facebook Live. I believe we can, right? You can watch us on Facebook. Yeah, we're on Facebook Live on our page at To the Left Radio, where all of our handles are at To the Left Radio.
Or it could be the future right now, and you could be listening to us on SoundCloud, iTunes, or the TuneIn app.
The future. We are in the future.
It could be tomorrow already, and they're listening to us.
You know what? The future is now. Thank you, Shauna. We are talking to Arthi Walker-Petakotla and Erica Bachner, who are running on the OPRF for Racial Equity platform. Arthi is running for village trustee in Oak Park. Erica is running in River Forest for village trustee. So we're going to continue the conversation with them. This has been great. I do want to touch upon something that I think, and folks who are interested in joining our conversation, you can give us a call at 773-763-9278. That's 773-763-WCPT.
If you call, please call and ask something related to this show.
Yeah.
Please.
If you're looking for the weather forecast, there's other resources. But one of the things we had talked about a little bit before we got on air was the fact that there's some organizations that are progressive. You were mentioning that there are dozens of organizations in Oak Park dealing with equity, and Erica, you're part of Indivisible. These are groups that are largely white-led and have predominantly white membership. And as you both pointed out, your boards are not representative of your communities. So, Erica, let's start with you. Talk about what it's been like to go from an organization that's predominantly white and being part of a group of women of color running. How has that transition been?
Well, I think that I share a lot of different spaces. So being part of Indivisible that is mainly white is just one aspect of what I do, right? So before the racial equity group, I have been in spaces that are largely women of color, people of color as well. For Indivisible, it started out with two former Obama staffers, right? Two white people, and they shared it via PDF as a guide to how to promote progressive issues. And when we look back at that, and we, as Indivisible, understand this, we look back at that, it was pushed out to just everybody's circles, right? And those circles were mainly white. We know that there's a lot of work to still be done there. And for myself, as a woman of color, I bring it up to our groups, and we understand that we are looking to bring in people of color. That's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot, quite frankly, it takes a lot of years of trust so that people don't think that you are coming in as a white savior and trying to step on the work that's already been happening for decades, especially in somewhere like Chicago. And really, until we get to that point where there is parity when you see leadership, we understand that our role is to help organizations do the work that they need to do in the ways that they're asking us to do it, right? So do you need us to bring out the hundreds of people to your rally so that we can amplify your voices? Do you need to push out your media on social media? Do you need us to canvass for you, as we did for Lauren Underwood? That's how we see our role. And anything that we do in terms of policy, we are trying to bring in as many voices as possible to make sure that we are doing the right thing.
Okay. Wait, it makes me think, though, of cases where sometimes groups that are progressive put a face of color in front an issue or a campaign, or they say, oh, this person is black, this person is brown, this person's Muslim, and they consider that to be enough. Yep. Arthur, you're nodding your head, so I know you've got something to say.
This is so relevant right now. Yeah. There's a group that my very dear friend Pam Campos Palma. It's a progressive veterans group, and there aren't a whole lot of progressive veterans spaces. This is a group. It's Common Defense. I'm just going to out them. Pam was the executive director, and they tokenized her completely. And she was the one that helped build the relationship between AOC, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and Common Defense. She helped do so many initiatives. We've done organizing around Yemen Can't Wait to stop the U.S. involvement in the Yemen civil war, to advocate for the Military Justice Improvement Act for sexual assault survivors in the military. And there was just so much gaslighting and tokenizing that she actually was forced out, really. She had to leave to protect herself. And white progressive spaces and now that spaces and many women of color and women have just left that space. And we are now trying to figure out, do we create our own space? And if we create our own space, will we have equivalent power to that space, right? And so white male, particularly white male-led organizations need to understand that if they bring a woman of color into leadership, they need to let her lead and they need to get out of her way. And if you're not doing that, you're just taking that person's voice and you're saying, I'm just going to use you as a token so I can say that I have a woman of color leading this organization, but I'm still going to do my own thing.
And something that happened this week.
Mark Meadows.
Yes.
So that was one of the things I wanted to bring up. It was one of the things I wanted to bring up in our opening segment, is that the Lynn Patton using a woman of color, a black woman. In the case of Lynn Patton, she was a member of the Trump Organization, who's now a HUD official. And Mark Meadows, who's a representative during the oversight hearing for Michael Cohen, literally had Lynn Patton standing behind him in a literal token. Yeah. And I have used literal. Someone's going to slap my wrist about it. But the point being is that Democrats do it, Republicans do it, progressives do it, conservatives do it. Everyone has had a Lynn Patton. They've used that in their rhetoric and in their actions.
But I think it's especially painful for women of color in the progressive space, because you say, like in the progressive space, we are advocating for social justice issues, for issues that are trying to lift up people of color out of these oppressive environments. But yet you're still not really being an accomplice and saying, I am going to hold off on my own personal advancement and lift you up. You're still not able to say that. And until we have people that are saying, you know what, I'm just going to sit this one out and I'm going to let you lead.
And that's an incredible distinction. So an ally versus an accomplice. So someone who's actually helping you and not just saying, you go. Mm-hmm. Someone who's like is knocking on doors for you, getting petition signatures. That's different than just saying, oh, that's so great that there's a woman of color running, which is a lot of what happens. Or what also happens, which is, why should I support this woman who's just a woman of color? That's all she is. Mm-hmm. And reducing us to our skin color and our identity. You are all listening to the Left. My name is Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
And we're talking to Arthi Walker-Pedakotla and Erica Bachner of OPR for Racial Equity. This has been a fascinating conversation, but and we have a few minutes left, but I want to make sure that we get some time to plug some events you guys have going on and how to find out more about your campaigns.
Yes. So I will plug an event. So one of the biggest problems that Erica and I both hear about are the property taxes. And my personal take on it is that property taxes are not just a citywide problem, it's a statewide problem. And I think that we need to pass a progressive income tax. So tomorrow... Today is Sunday.
Yeah, it is tomorrow.
It's like, what day is it? Tomorrow, Monday, at Oak Park Public Library, main branch on Lake Street at 7 p.m., we're going to have former gubernatorial candidate and state senator Daniel Biss, current state representative, one of the most progressive reps, Will Guzzardi, and then Kina Collins, who's a friend of the show in this campaign, for Samina's campaign, they are going to come out and talk about why we need a progressive income tax and how that impacts property taxes, how that impacts communities really at the grassroots level. And really what we're trying to do is get people at the local level aware of how all of these things are connected. So that's one event I want to plug. The second is on April 1st, which is Election Eve, we are having, I'm so excited, a rally. So in Scoville Park, right off the Green Line stop, Ridgeland, Oak Park Avenue Green Line stop. It is a rally that is completely organized
Harlem
by
Avenue Green.
Harlem Avenue. Thank you. So it's a rally.
You guys are a good team.
Yeah, that's completely organized by women of color. We're going to have some elected women of color come and talk. We are going to have women of color performers that are actually getting paid for their work. So we have a T-shirt fundraiser happening, and you can find out about all of this information on OPRF for Racial Equity's page, and then you can find out about my campaign at arthyforoakpark.com.
And that's ARTI for Oak Park.
Yes.
And let's share those. If our wonderful production assistant Anna could share those links on the live stream, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
And Erica?
You can find me at ericabachner.com.
Okay. Well, there we
That
go.
was easy.
Any other events that we should know about?
The April 1st event is something that I'll be participating into, and just as you say, helping women of color out in all the things that we need to get voted in. I think that's what we're really looking for.
So making phone calls, knocking on doors, making donations. Those are the things that, again, if your commitment is to racial equity and justice, and I would be remiss if we didn't reflect on the fact that this week we just learned in Sacramento that the killers of Stephon Clark are not going to be prosecuted. And so when we think about movements and changes, even in our city of Chicago races, how much activists have actually moved the needle, and a lot of these movements are women of color led. Mm-hmm. So we can't ignore that. And so this is ultimately like a natural progression is for you all, and I applaud you for doing this, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Shauna and I are going to close out the show. We got we got our own plug-in to do, Shauna.
We do. I just wanted to thank Ms. Lady B and also Dennis.
And
prefers
Anna.
Dennis.
Yeah.
And Anna, our production assistant, for doing all the work behind the scenes. Want to thank Artie and Erica for being here. Allie Marcella, who was our fill-in production assistant last week because Anna was sick, which was great. And I want to thank supporters like Sheila Garland Olanaran and Charles Kraft, who stepped up to be on our host committee.
Nice.
For our fundraiser on March 16th.
Perfect.
And to all those at home amplifying our show via social media, make sure you use the hashtag To The Left. That's TO The Left. And just so everyone knows, our airtime is brokered, meaning that we have to pay for it ahead of each broadcast. And we raised $283.14 since last week, thanks to Sheila Charles Kraft for buying tickets for people to bring them to the fundraiser. So
nice.
Thank you. Please join our community today. Become a monthly supporter at patreon.com/To The Left Radio. And our March 16th fundraiser at the Hideout, we are having Dr. Amara Enya will be there to spill the tea.
The teapot. The teapot is going to get smashed
The
that
teapot
day.
is going to be teetering on the edge of a table, and it might burn you.
We're smashing it like the patriarchy, Shauna.
Yes.
We're doing.
And also our friend Ricardo Gamboa.
Love Ricardo.
And we're going to have some more guests, TBA.
Yeah, we're doing it.
It's going to be great.
We're calling all the people who won and got into runoffs. Speaking of which, next week we're talking to some folks. We're still finalizing things, so it's going to be a little bit of a secret, right?
Definitely Marianne Lalonde is going to be on, right?
Right. So she's running she's in a runoff against James Kappelman in the 46th ward, which is a big deal. Again, going back to what we said at the top of the show, the fact that we have so many incumbents that are in races where they were challenged by several challengers and now are having to continue to run and weren't reelected. unlike Ed Burke.
And we're going to try to have someone else on to be announced also.
Yes, hopefully another woman.
In a runoff.
Yeah, who's in a runoff. Yeah, that was our hope, to do sort of a women pushing the needle.
Yeah,
and
against machine peeps, hopefully.
Yeah, running against, absolutely the machine. I mean, that's the other thing I want to just also mention is the history of this race. And I think Martise Chisholm, who's a friend of both of ours from National Nurses United, said, I love this. She said, Harold Washington is probably up there laughing, mayor of Chicago, first black mayor of Chicago, because the election laws were changed to prevent another Harold Washington. So we would never have another black mayor again. So she said, you would be laughing because the runoff, we've got 2 African-American women running. Now, I know you've got your issues with both of them, and they have issues. But this is a big deal.
No, I'm not going to downplay that. That's amazing. It's historic.
32 years it's been since we've had black. We've never had a black woman.
I just wish it was black women that we knew are going to fight for us.
Yes,
and not just
And let's be clear, both Lori Lightfoot and Toni Preckwinkle had some. I think who did that little do you remember that map where they had Daley and Burke, and they had these heads, and they did a diagram of how many connections they had, and Susanna Mendoza was connected.
Yeah, the machine connections.
It was Rahm, Daley, Burke, and they were doing these. So there was nobody who didn't have a connection. So,
right.
And we're going to spill that tea on March 16th.
And I just have a quick question. Since we were talking about Samina's campaign and what an incubator it was for all of these amazing women to come together, just curious if Samina's going to run again.
You know what? We're out of time. Lady B, take us out. Thank you. You've been listening to the Left. I'm Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
We'll be back next week. Thanks
See you
so
next
much.
week. Bye.